Thank you, Vanita, for being here on the Mental Insights podcast today. It's truly a pleasure, and it's going to be exciting to hear more about your work and share a little bit about the insights that you know within the mental health field. To start, could you tell us a little bit more about Dreamwell Coaching and your passion and purpose behind that company?
Sure. Dreamwell's had a long history of kind of evolving into what it is today. If I can start back from February of 2011, when it all began for me, it was a personal journey of just probably being at the lowest point in my life. And I had Um, I had gone through I just moved to a new state. I just moved to the state of Ohio with my husband and my two kids. At the time, I had a 5-year-old and a newborn, and my husband was deployed to Afghanistan, and I was in a new state by myself. And I transferred jobs, so I had the same location that I was at in Las Vegas, which was my previous location. I moved to that same location in terms of jobs in the state of Ohio. And so I was a social worker working within my profession. I had two kids, two small kids. My husband was deployed, and we attended a church, and they found out what I did for a living, and they asked me to be a community outreach leader. And so me, very just willing to please, I just said, okay, I would be interested. But I didn't know what that entailed. And so it was a 600 member church, and I ended up being the community outreach leader, which was probably one of the hardest jobs I had ever done in terms of managing people and resources. So it's extremely hard. And then to put the icing on the cake, I was in grad school. And so I had probably the top 8 of the top 10 stressors, which, all came down at one time in my life. And so when I went into my room of just despair, going through my mind, I had came home from work one day, and I laid my kids down, and I just said, oh, I can't continue this way. Working as a social worker, one of those things is enough, but all of those things together was just taking me out. And I just said, I need to do something. And I'm extremely visual, so I created a vision board. Only at the time, I didn't know what a vision board was. I hadn't even heard of the term. I'm not into, the whole mystical thing. I just felt like there was some woo-woo-ness about it. But for me, I didn't know what I was doing. I just sat on my bedroom floor, and I just said, Lord, I need help. And I prayed, and I just asked for clarity and vision on my future, because I knew that this couldn't remain. And that was February of 2011. Fast forward to February of 2013, and I had come out of that situation. Actually, when I went back, after I finished my vision board, I'll go back to February 2011. When I finished my vision board, I got up from the floor, and I remember feeling relieved. I remember feeling like the weight had been lifted from my chest, and like I was able to breathe. And I think that came from just surrendering and saying, I can't do this on my own. I need help, and something's going to have to change. And it was weird to experience a mental shift when nothing in my circumstances had changed. But that's exactly what I had experienced. It was a complete new set of glasses that I was able to see through, where I went from feeling probably the most stressed I've ever felt. If I went to a mental health therapist, they would have probably diagnosed me with some type of anxiety disorder or depression, because it was just a low sunken place, and I felt like I was in a drowning hole and I couldn't catch my breath. Um, and so when I fast forward to February 2013, I felt compelled to share how I came out of that situation with the people around me. And so I asked people to come to the library, it's a local library in Ohio. And I just said, if you guys would mind, please come. It was just more of like, let me share my testimony type of a thing. And I wasn't sure about a name. So the name of Dreamwell is a whole nother story, but I just named it Dreamwell, thinking that there was, some biblical and also healing background for myself in naming it Dreamwell. And so I just asked them to come to hear a presentation from Dreamwell. And they came. It was about maybe 7 or 8 women. And when they got there, by the time I was finished sharing my heart, I really feel like there was a complete, they experienced what I experienced on that floor in 2011. And everybody in the room was in tears. Everybody was lifted. Their spirits were lifted. They were encouraged to go on. And I'm like, what is happening here? And so feeling that and seeing how my story can help someone else, it just, it set the course for Dreamwell. And we had moved several different places. I had opened up a Dreamwell coaching. It wasn't a coaching center. I hadn't even got comfortable with the term of coach at that time. I was a full-time social worker, and I was working actually we had moved to Hawaii, and I'd opened up a coaching. Actually, it wasn't coaching. I'm saying coaching because that's what it is now, but it was called Dreamwell, and I would advertise it as almost like a consulting, but it was like a helping type of profession. It wasn't even clear. I remember trying to declare my licensing for insurance when I got the building. And he was like, so what is it exactly? And I was like, well, this is what I do. And I explained it to him, and he was trying to put me in this category. And I was like, well, I'm not that. And so I was trying to, it was, really weird. And it's just over time, now 2019, it evolved into what I like to identify as coaching. And I just became comfortable with the term coaching because I really feel like I went through this whole process of developing Dreamwell without the support of the mental health community. And so I didn't want to give it a therapeutic name, because I do have my license. I'm a licensed social worker, and I could have went that route in terms of therapy or counseling center or those types of things. But in my heart of hearts, I just wanted to remain true to my experience. And that's what it was for me when I first created it. So that's kind of like the history of how Dreamwell came to be. And now our mission and our purpose is to be an intermediate mental health support service for parents and children to help manage emotional and behavioral problems. And I say intermediate with a respect for the mental health community. I work in this industry. I've worked for the last 10 years. I've worked in this industry. I know exactly what it takes and the level of mental health disorders that are out there. However, I don't believe that every person fits into that category. And so when I was creating Dreamwell, I had that in mind. And so now here we are as a mental health coaching, a intermediate service for people who may not need mental health services, but just aren't sure. And I've seen a lot of people, and I can get into this later if you want to move on, but I've seen a lot of people fall into the hole of not receiving services because they didn't want to be characterized in this mental health bubble.
Thank you for sharing that, Vanita. I really appreciate it. And the first thing that I want to touch on is it's so awesome that you have tangible evidence right when you started to think of Dreamwell and pushing that out, and just the message, that testimony that you had throughout your friends. That must have been such an incredible experience, because it truly showed that it's your passion and you can create something out of it. So that's so awesome that you're able to do that. I'm glad you were able to share that. And the second, as you were following up, it was a conversation I actually was having with someone earlier today, a few hours ago, and it truly is. It's remarkable because there's so many people that don't seek out the resources due to that stigma, due to the labeling, due to what's associated with that measure. And we were saying, there's such a large percentage that is in that intermediate phase of, if I am struggling with a mental health challenge, but they don't want to seek out those resources. And I think it's so awesome that you characterize and phrase your work that way, because often I do see coaches or, people that like to phrase what they do within coaching, and they try to speak to themselves as being a mental health service and such. But I feel like you phrase it very well in order to say that, this is for the people that are still, struggling with the issue, but, they're not trying to seek it out. And I think you're doing a great step, because as they work with you, maybe they are seeing that the labeling isn't such a bad area to seek out or such. But I think it's great the way that you spoke about that, because it really is important to know that, first of all, the stigma is not a problem. It's something that everybody faces with, but it is true that there's a large percentage of people that are in that intermediate phase, and they're not open, or maybe they're not ready to characterize themselves in that measure. But I think that's one thing that we do need to change, is that, there isn't that stigma wrapped around it. But I think it's great that you offer the services in that way, because it's such an important step, I think, within mental health to, phrase it the right way in order for, you know, clients, patients to feel comfortable and welcoming to come to you for your services. And, that's really the biggest step, because, I mean, you're breaking down that barrier by changing the way it is phrased and allowing a lot of people to feel safe and comfortable that they need your services and that they need your help. It transitions into, what services do you provide to people throughout Dreamwell coaching, and share a little bit about, what you're able to provide people within, this intermediate phase within the mental health field.
Well, the services that Dreamwell Coaching provides, and thank you for saying that, because it's hard talking to somebody who has received mental health services to convince people that there are a whole group of people who are not receiving services who need them. And, providing an intermediate service such as Dreamwell gives them a chance to get help. So nobody has to suffer alone. And so that is just, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen this over and over. But the services that we provide, so I only provide 2 services right now. And my ideal client would be for a parent who is either struggling to manage the journey of mental health in themselves or in their child, or even just experiencing extreme overwhelm or sadness or frustrations or anger or any emotion that cannot be managed within their own level of resource. I provide a outlet through what I call the oxygen mask program. And I created a 4-week program to help parents who are dealing with any range of emotion to manage what is a hard and can somewhat be long road of getting out of their struggle. And I think it's through the emotional and behavioral coaching that I'm able to provide for parents that gives them the I would say the solutions, the solutions to overcome these situations. So that's one program. It's through the Oxygen Mask program, and it's a 4-week, I like to call it a 4-week course, because I like to go to be extremely intensive with individuals. However, it is individualized, because I've worked for many, many companies living in multiple states where the program is designed as a less of a template and more of a outline. I mean, less of an outline, more of a Like, it's, you have to do these steps. And for me, I designed my oxygen mask program as an individualistic program where I'm able to help the individual where they are, because everybody's at a different place and has a different understanding. So I think the first component is really just teaching them, educating them on this whole process. And a good coach will always tell you that this is just an intermediate step. If you need therapy, I'm going to refer you to a therapist. If you need, if I feel like there is some more, if you need a higher level of care, I will be the first one to refer you. And so I always try to give people the understanding that this is not the end all be all. Once I get coaching, I'm fixed. No, but this is a start, and here's how you can manage those things. And I found, and that's one of the services. The other services is with children. I've worked in schools as a behavioral specialist, as a school counselor, as a therapist. And the things that I would see, it would blow your mind, Brendan. I mean, just some of the stuff that I had to encounter on a daily basis. The amount of kids who say, I want to kill myself. The amount of kids who say, I'm triggered. The amount of kids who laugh when the children are coming to see me because, oh, you must be crazy. That stigma is there. And, I would just feel like there's so much missing in our schools for our children that, I really felt like one of the needs that Dreamwell could meet is not only working individually with the kids to provide, I would say, what I like to deem as quick interventions, where children are coming to school, they had a bad night, they didn't sleep well, they didn't even eat breakfast, they didn't see their parents didn't come home, they were up on their phone till 4 a.m., they're tired, they're cranky, they want to fight everybody they see, they're cussing out teachers, all these things that happen in schools that nobody, unless you're a teacher, you don't really hear about these things. And so being a parent, I just, my heart would break. And so I would say, let's go. I would pull them in my office unsolicited without the going to have to see me on like a mental health type of consultation or assessment. It would just be, let's deal with the problem and let's help you manage the day. And I would start there with the child. And many times they would be, I could help them recalibrate or regulate their emotions. And so that's what I provide for children. And the last component is for teachers. And for teachers, I like to provide them the education or the skills that I believe they need in the classroom to manage problematic behaviors. Because when you have a kid who's autistic sitting next to a kid who's OCD, it's a firestorm waiting to happen. And, whether the autistic kid is poking you or clicking or tapping or, whatever he might need to do to help regulate himself, it sets this OCD kid off. And forget the intermittent explosive disorder or the post-traumatic stress disorder or anything that might trigger another child in the room. And so then before you know it, you have an explosion in the room and they're calling security or asking for help or sending kids to the principal. And I just feel like if the teacher was aware that these two can't sit next to each other, and here's how you can manage this problematic behavior, small fixes, let the kid who wants to tap go into a space that's comfortable for him. Let the kid who's mostly angry create his safety bubble, whatever that looks like. And so I want to train teachers, and I've had the chance to do this at the previous school when I lived back in the United States, and I was able to help teachers daily. I mean, it was a daily work. With managing these, I would go into the classroom and it would be chaos, and I'd have to take out the problems, the kids who were creating the problems. And after talking to them, I'm like, well, this was an easy fix. I could have helped you with this before it gotten into a fist fight. And so those are the services that I provide through Dreamwell. And I really feel like those are when I say intermediate, those are the intermediate services that sitting down for an hour with a therapist is not going to help. And so, and many of these kids were already in therapy. So providing those quick interventions, those coaching strategies for teachers and helping parents to navigate this crazy world of mental health was essential. essential. And I felt like those were the best, that was the best use of my role as a Dreamwell coach, to provide for people, for the need that's out there.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. It's definitely a lot of environments that need the support. When you look at whether it's at home with the parent or the child, or whether it's in school with the teacher and the child, these are a lot of environments that dictate a lot of how our mental health plays out within our future. So it's awesome that you're providing your services, your time, your effort in order to alleviate some of the issues and challenges that could arise in those environments, because they're drastic for a lot of child development, especially. To really start off with the adult, with the parents, when you're beginning about what you were facing back in 2011, you were saying you had those 9 out of 10 stressors. And I think that's a good, topic to start at, because you have a lot of parents that may be pulled one way due to work, whether they're pulled another way due to, caring for their children, taking them to sports, taking them to school, taking them to this, that, the other. For a parent that is getting pulled astray in all directions and feels that they're not really, maybe they're just not feeling themselves, how could they reach out to you, and what would be, your voice of opinion for them to want to seek out, whether it's Dreamwell coaching or any type of services that can just provide them the insights to know that they can change. It's just a few, whether it's behavioral steps or emotional coping steps. What would be your response to them to wanting to seek out your services?
Well, first I would do an assessment, because I think this is where my school training comes back in, where you have to determine the need at the time. And I think every single person presents trauma in a different way. Some people mask it very well and they present with a strong face, but inside they're hurting. Or some people just outwardly, you can tell there is something going on. And so I always start with an assessment. And so I'll give you an example of what this looks like. I remember I was meeting with a child who was new to our school, and he came in. And so my job is to just introduce myself and what role I'll play in his life as he's preparing for services with me. And that was on the therapy level, and that's diagnosis, treatment, and assessment, and all of those things. And so for me, that was one part of it. Well, the parent asked to speak to me separately, and I can't tell you how many times this happened. And he shut the door and broke down. And he said, it was a big Black man who you just wouldn't expect to cry. And that caught me off guard. And I just was like, oh, wow, you're hurting, and so much so that he was just exhausted with having tried so many things that did not work. And I just listened. And that's what he needed at the time. He needed to know, he needed me to normalize some of the things that he was experiencing. He didn't need me to medicalize these issues that he's having by calling him depressed, by calling him anxious, by saying he needed to see a therapist. He just needed me to listen. And so that's what I gave him at the time. He wasn't my client. He wasn't the identified client. He was a parent saying, help me, please. And this just solidified Dreamwell's work, because sometimes you just have to listen, and people need to feel validated through their frustration, through their anger, through being confused, by navigating this just roller coaster of emotions that people experience. And I think listening to him, for him, was all that he needed. You can see, so I always ask people, if you had to quantify your feeling with a number, what would it be? 10 being, this is the worst I've ever felt, and 1 being, I can handle this. This is no problem. He was off the charts, probably 100 if if he could have actually physically, tangibly given me a number. And I remember I saw the calm in him before he left my office, and all he needed me to do was hear him. you understand this world. I need you to validate that I'm not crazy. I'm not going crazy. And I need you to listen to me and just tell me that I'm normal. And so when I was finished talking to him and I gave him some solutions for his son, he was so relieved. I would say he scaled back to probably a 5, leaving my office, feeling that I'm empowered to do something to help my child and myself manage this whole world of craziness, you know. And for him, I just felt that's a win, you know, that was a win. And it was a great experience. So that's an example.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's such a great example to share. It definitely shows how powerful just having your presence there for someone to speak and alleviate some of the things that they've been facing is all a lot of us, really need. And, for a lot of people, that is what therapy, that it's that purpose, just to be there and to have someone to talk to that's a comfortable environment that knows how to listen. And, that's so awesome that you have that as such a, that's such a pillar in terms of the work that you do. Just you being there can drastically change someone's day, but you're the one who is putting yourself out there, putting that time out there to be there. So that's so awesome. And to go to the flip side of things, in the child's perspective, for a lot of people, this is the stigma of why a lot of people don't reach out, children especially, because one, they don't even necessarily know what mental health is, and others because, they don't really want to remember any of the maybe trauma that they experienced, or whether it was a challenge that they had in a relation with someone else. So, for a child that, has experienced trauma or any type of challenge, what is the best way for, yourself or any type of service to try to, bring in children that are facing some of these traumatic issues, or, just having trouble managing their emotions, or having, a relationship with their friend? How could we make it easier for children to want to, speak out and just, share a little bit more about themselves? Because I think if children did know that services were out there, they would come and share a lot more that they've experienced and been through, compared to now, when a lot of it is bottled in. And then 20 years later is when a lot of these mental health challenges arise within, young adults, because they experienced a traumatic issue at their youth. So, how can we try to change the way mental health is viewed, and try to bring in more comfortability for children today to seek out the services such as Dreamwell coaching, such as therapists, such as, any type of mental health service today?
Yeah. So, what I found to be most effective is the education piece. And so there's many components to this. Now, there's a level of issues that identify right away as being symptomatic of a more of needing a higher level of care. Hearing voices, schizophrenia, terms that are, you know, um, are going to trigger a higher level of care right away. And for those issues, as a mental health professional, I have to say, go to a doctor right away. But then there's these issues that, no, I just hate my dad. I just wish I wasn't alive. I don't have a plan to kill myself. I just don't want to live today. Or the child who is just angry at the world, and they can't pinpoint the one issue that might have triggered that anger. But in talking to them, it spills out in everything they do. These are some of the issues that I would deal with as a mental health coach. There's some issues that are distinguished for a mental health therapist, and I believe as a mental health coach, this is where that intermediate piece comes in. For the child who's angry, who's coming into the school and punching a locker, you don't need a therapist in this moment. You need somebody to intervene right now. And that's who I am. And so when I go into the schools or even sometimes working in the home, and that's the hardest work, by the way, but
I can only
because
imagine.
you deal with the family dynamic, but working with these kids and getting them to understand that, you know, there is this language that we are giving to I guess what we deem as helping these kids through therapy and through coaching doesn't feel the same to the kid. And what I mean by that is I did a small survey in the school that I was at, and I asked kids, what feels good? What feels better to you? When you say therapy, what does that bring up for you? When you say coaching, what does that bring up for you? And many times, actually 99% of the time, the children would say, coaching feels better to me, because they were free from having to explain it to their peers when they would see a coach or when they would go to see somebody for therapy. Because therapy in schools, kids are unforgiving. They are relentless, they are honest, and they're going to tell you exactly how they feel. And so for many of them, it felt better to have somebody who's coaching them through a problem versus somebody who's giving them therapy to fix them. And this is the things that why we had to educate them. And I think that's where the education piece, why it's so important, because they have a representation in their mind that therapy means I'm broken and coaching means I just need a few tweaks. And so it felt better for them internally to be able to say, I just need a coach, or I'm going to talk to my coach, versus I'm going to talk to my therapist. And I think that it allowed the kids the freedom, for one, to decide, for two, to become empowered in terms of how they were able to make this fit in their world. Because if in their world, they're dealing with bullying, they're dealing with teasing, they're dealing with parents who don't understand, what it is that they're feeling or what they need even, then this coaching is okay because it helps me. And if I need it, then I can go to therapy. So for me, a large part of what I do is educating them on the differences between the two and how they may have a misconception about what therapy is and how it can also help. Because like I said, many of my clients have a coach at school for me or a therapist. They have both. And so I think the education piece is huge. And then framing it in a way that allows them to feel safe with receiving services.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's definitely important to, try to normalize the conversation and make it okay for children to, seek out whatever they need, which is definitely very important. And then on the flip side, you have, teachers, you have other different professionals within a school environment that need to know how to, manage these children and understand the best way to act and speak to these children throughout their day. So how can you prepare any other staff members, teachers, to help manage children throughout their day? Because the growing rate of mental health conditions today is definitely alarming. So what are some ways that you're able to help train and teach teachers, about mental health and how to, interact with some of behavioral issues within students, or, different types of challenges that may arise throughout the school day?
Yeah. And that's a great question. And, one of the things that I love to start with with teachers is self-regulation. Because what happens is students and parents kind of forget that teachers are humans. They're not robots. They get angry, they yell, they feel certain ways about children. Some teachers don't like the kids that they have to deal with, especially if it's the smelly kid, or the kid who keeps lunch meat in his pocket and always smells like bologna or salami. Like, these are things that actually happen. And so when teachers have to deal with this, they have they have their own experiences that have created their viewpoint. And sometimes it reflects negatively on the child. And what I like to tell them is your children can feel how you feel about them. Especially children, I think, are much more sensitive to energy. And you might think I'm putting on a good face. See, I'm smiling and I'm not yelling. However, they feel you don't like them. And many of my students would come to me and say, so-and-so doesn't like me. This so-and-so doesn't like me, and I don't like her either. And that this is what the communication is from the child. And so my first skill for any teacher who is working with children with problematic behaviors is first regulate yourself. You have to get rid of all of the limitations that would keep you from helping this child. And I do that by showing them, by reminding them of the reason why. Why did you start in this field? Remember your reason why. And usually that grounds them. It provides an anchor for them to really understand that their position in this child's life is extremely impactful. And a child feeling unliked by an adult is, you might as well be punching him in the face, and that's what it feels like to this child who is trying to get the big bully teacher off of them, even though the teacher's like, but I'm not doing anything. But you don't call him up to your desk for ask him how his day was, or even look him in the eyes when you talk to him. So these are some things that I help teachers do. Self-regulate. And then there's a whole set of coaching skills that I feel like teachers have to understand as well in terms of managing this behavior. Once you're self-regulated, it is so easy to see that there's more going on here. I always tell teachers, never diagnose your children. That's beyond the skill set. Don't diagnose your children. Give them the opportunity to talk to somebody about their problems. Refer them to the me's of the world, refer them to the school counselor or the school therapist. And that let them get the proper services to help manage the issues. Because sometimes it's not I hear this a lot. That kid has ADHD. That kid has bipolar disorder. That kid has OCD. How do you know? Where's it at in his record? Where's the therapeutic assessment? These things are not just determined by an opinion. They are determined by a criteria set by the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is done through a very stringent and scientific process. It's not just an opinion of what you think this child is. And I always educate them on that too. Please do not diagnose your children. Give them an opportunity to get some help to manage their behavior, but ultimately give them a chance to live outside of the way that you see them. And that helps. And, of course, the practical skills that you learn in coaching, which is reflection and mirroring and listening. And I think some of the nonverbal skills are some of the biggest things that teachers tend to miss because they just are going about their day and it's not on their radar. And so, the flippant answers, the non-smiling, those types of nonverbal skills. And I think every school has probably what's called a PBIS model, which is identified as like a student support service model to be able to help the child in the classroom. Smiley faces, token society. When you do something good, you get these things, but those things don't manage the problem behaviors. They promote more of the good behaviors, but they don't manage the problem. So I think those are understanding the world of the mind of a child who truly does have an issue, and understanding where you are, like being grounded in the moment, that remembering the reason why. Those types of things are just essential for a teacher when they're working with a child with problematic behaviors.
That's great. Thank you. And, we're speaking a lot about the interactions between, two parties, whether it's the parent, whether it's with the child, or whether it's, the teacher with the child. But outside of that, the relationship that we have within ourself is truly valuable within our own mental health. And, self-care, self-love is definitely big topics throughout today in terms of just how you can treat yourself, how you can take care of yourself. So for, even whether it's the adult or the child, what are some ways that, they can focus on taking care of themselves and providing a warm and, comforting environment for themselves in order to promote better mental health.
Yeah, so there's so many things that I think are missed in the basics. So there was a book that I read. It is called the uh, the the God Mind, I believe it's what it's called. It's by Timothy Jennings, and he is a neuropsychologist, I think, some big fancy term where he studies the brain and behavior, which is amazing because that's a connection that wasn't made before in terms of mental health. But anyway, one of the things, so the book was amazing. And so I was very excited to hear his point of view. And I sent him a letter and I'd asked him, hey, I work with these kids and I'm seeing these levels of aggression, and I'm seeing this, some of the things that I was seeing in the schools. And I wrote him about these things and I asked him, what is some of your best advice that I can give to these parents, that I can give to these teachers on how to manage within the realm of just, okay, I have this mental health issue, or I have this child with mental health, or even that I'm managing this child with mental health. What can I do? And he told me the most simplest and basic of answers: proper sleep, diet, exercise, positive home environment, like just the basic. And I'm like, really? I'm expecting some huge, you know, uh, deep uncovered secret. And he's like, back to the basics. And I found that diet is not talked about enough in our mental health community. I think that is one of the things, that is one of the number one pieces of advice that I give to my parents. What is your child eating? What are they putting into their bodies? And I always say, I even created I believe it was a YouTube post, something on my YouTube channel that said your food affects your mood. And it's so overlooked because we're like, no, it's the medication, it's the environment, your food. What are you putting into your body? And so I really like to say, in terms of self-care, what are you putting into your body? What food are you eating? From the dyes to the chemicals to the packaged, processed, GMO versus non-GMO versus MSG, all of the partially hydrogenated oil, all this stuff that we put into our bodies that we're just like, we don't think about it at all. I remember I was talking to one of the parents. I was working in the school again, and one of the parents was like, I just don't know what's wrong with her. She's acting this way and this. And she's like, and she does this mostly at school. And I said, well, what is she eating? And she was sitting right next to me eating a bag of red hot Cheetos, fingers full of red dye, sucking on her fingers. And I said, I can guarantee, take these things out of her diet and you will see a change in her behavior. And it was like lights came on, like an aha moment, like, I hadn't even considered, they're like, the therapy's not working, and so they're complaining and they're upset with their outside therapist. And I'm just like, your food affects your mood. And it was just like eye-opening for this parent to even consider that the food is part of it. And the child was slightly overweight already, and she was just dealing with the mismanagement of her mind, and it was affecting her feelings. She was sad and depressed, and she would have these spikes in her mood. And they were drinking these large monster drinks every morning. They come in with these large, and I'm like, what is that? It's a shot of caffeine, and it jolts their body. And so they want to run around the halls and, punch lockers. And it's like, wait, what is happening? So the basics, and that's what I go back to the basics. Your food affects your mood. Exercise is extremely important. It creates the endorphins that you need to be able to get up and have the energy to go throughout your day. Turn off your phone. It's another one. Have a phone curfew. Shut down the phone for them at night. And in terms of self-care, I always look at what they're watching. I said, you really don't know what your child is seeing on that little screen of theirs till 4:00 in the morning when they come to school and they're dead tired. Like, didn't you just wake up? Yeah, but I didn't get any sleep. Well, why? Because I was on, YouTube all night. Well, here's why. Or playing video games or whatever. So it's the basics. Go back to the foundation. So that would be my advice.
That's awesome. No, those are great examples, and it truly, it's incredible if you think about it that, a problem, just mental health is such a large challenge throughout our whole entire world. And if we were able to simply promote a lot of these, basic routines and implement them within everybody who's facing this, these mental health challenges, I think we could severely cut, you know, I don't know, maybe a large
Half.
percentage, yeah, half
Yeah.
of a lot of these challenges just based on that, whether it's, nutrition, whether it's exercise or sleep. All of these have major impacts to how we think, behave, and interact. And it would be it would be interesting to see if everybody truly continues to follow this measure, because it's something I realized within my mental health, within just the way that I thought and interacted with people, as I started to focus more on my nutrition, especially, and my sleep. Those are like two things that I really took control over, and it drastically changed the way that I even felt throughout a lot of the day. So
Yeah.
it's hopefully it's something that continues to grow within, the mental health community, because it's truly some of the, best ways that you can take care of yourself in, a quick measure. It's not stuff that takes a lot of, deep thinking, or, a lot of pressure to get towards. It's, finding the right time to go to bed, and just changing what you're eating, so you're not like consuming more time throughout that. And as simple as a 15-minute walk can drastically
Yes. Oh,
change.
yes.
Yeah, it clears your mind. There's so many benefits to just a 15-minute walk, getting out into nature. So it's awesome what, the basic necessities of, human needs can change the way that we actually act and think. So it's incredible, and it's interesting that we're just kind of finding this out now. We're just
Yeah.
realizing that it's
Yeah.
so drastically important. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, no, it's great, but at least hopefully we can continue to push this message and bring it out to people, because it definitely is an important topic. And speaking on something a little bit of what we talked about earlier, we spoke about some of the barriers and some of, the reasons why someone may not seek out services. But I think it's a good topic of conversation to speak about, what are some of the barriers? What are some of the things that are stopping a lot of people, whether it's a parent, whether it's a child, whether it's a teacher, of like seeking out services and seeking out the help that they need? Because we spoke about, there's a large percentage that still doesn't seek that out, and whether it's the intermediate services. But what is the true cause of why a lot of people aren't seeking out mental health services today? What are the barriers? What are the things that are stopping a lot of people?
Well, from my experience, and this is what I can speak wholeheartedly from because it's what I've seen with my own eyes, is that a lot of people are put off by the world of labeling and being given a diagnosis for what they would have deemed a normal behavior. And sometimes it's too intrusive in order to talk to someone. I have to have a mental health diagnosis just to be able to tell you that I'm sad that my father died, and I think that type uh, of within the mental health community, you look at the people who are getting the support and the services that they need and want, and the ones who aren't, are it's not that they are necessarily in poverty or that they are not educated on the process. Sometimes it feels like they're being intruded upon. I remember doing 15-page assessments before I can diagnose someone as a school therapist. And it was like, or even just when I worked in foster care, I worked in foster care for many years. And that was one of the biggest issues. It was like, that they had to, um, have a mental health diagnosis for just experiencing a hard time in life. And it was almost unfair to them. And there wasn't another option at the time. And I didn't have any solutions at the time. And so now I'm able to say, hey, here's Streamwell. You can still get the support you need. You can still get some help to manage the issues. And if you need a higher level of care, I'll refer you and I'll be happy to do so. And that gives them the out to be able to say, okay, I'll try it so I don't have to go without. And then there's this world of that's one of the things in terms of being super intrusive and having to tell your life story just to be able to tell you that you're struggling with managing the loss of your father, and so that's one of the issues. And then another issue is NAMI had done a study on the wait times. You're familiar with NAMI, it's the National Alliance for
Yeah.
Mental Illness, and they said that people are being deterred from receiving or from going to get services because of the 2 to 3 month wait times. I remember when I was working in many different states and that I've lived in, and the parents would say, I did what you asked me to. I went to get an outside therapist, and I wasn't, and they can't see me. They can't do a mental health assessment for 3 months. And they're like, so what do I do now? And I had nothing to tell them at the time. And I would have loved to have said, hey, here's Streamwell, but it's just a missed demographic of people because just that one variable, which is wait times. And it speaks to the need. It speaks to how bad this problem really is. It's 1 in 5. So you can 1 in 3 or 1 in 5. I thought I read 1 in 5 on the NAMI website have a mental illness or have a serious mental illness. Mm-hmm. And these are things that can be controlled if there was an intermediate service. If we had more of me, more of my service, more of this out there, imagine how many people would have felt the support they needed in those times. I remember, not even too long ago, there was a person who needed, he was feeling suicidal. And because of he called his doctor, and his doctor said, are you in any immediate danger? And he said, well, no. Or do you have a plan to kill yourself? No, but I'm feeling these thoughts won't leave me. And I'm feeling like I can't see you. And it was like, wait, what? Wait, if you can't see him, then who do you see? I'm not real sure about that, but it's just the need is so great. So I get it. And I've been on the other side of this. So I remember my calendar. I said, I can't take any more clients. I have too many. And it was just, the need was so great. You can't do that in a school with 300 kids. They need you and you got to be there. And so that's also part of it. The long wait times. The other one is medication. Over-diagnosing and over-medicalizing and under-medicalizing. Giving kids medication, this is a tough point for me because of some of the things that I've witnessed, some of the kids that I've had on my caseload, and the things that I had to endure as I'm watching a kid who is drugged out, barely keep his head off the table because he's overdiagnosed. He has too much medication. And they're trying their hardest to manage within the confines of what they're given, because doctors have to work within a certain restricted, area as well. They can't see you every week. They can't, there's so many things that they have to try to do as well. And these medical cocktails that they give these children, sometimes it would blow my mind. And that's another barrier. And it was sad to see, one of the little ones, he was in maybe 3rd grade, and it was just, it brings chills and tears to my eyes right now just to talk about it, because to see a child that young on doped up, it just takes you to a different place. So those are 3 of the biggest: over-diagnosing, medications, long wait times. Those are the biggest ones that I've seen. And then also in the medicalizing of normal behavior. Everything has to be a mental health disorder as opposed to just me going through a hard time, and I think it's unfair to have to give a mental health diagnosis just so you can bill Medicaid, and I was on the other end of that. So I know what that feels like to have to do that. And so when I created that quick coaching model in schools, it was super effective, because not only did they not have to get a mental health diagnosis, or they could avoid the stigma. It was also them being able to feel normal. And that was very helpful. So there's a lot of issues there, and some of them are very close to my heart, but I feel this way because of what I've experienced and what I've seen with my own eyes. I've been a social worker since 2008, and I've been working in this field. And I have my master's in human services, and I've worked in counseling. I worked as a therapist. I've worked as program director, and these things that it's just sad, it really is.
Definitely. Thank you for that. I appreciate you sharing that, because it's definitely a lot of the big issues as to why a lot of people aren't seeking out services. And it's definitely very sad, because, there needs to be a big change within the mental health field, because there's, I believe the World Health Organization came out with that 800,000 people commit suicide a year. That's a staggering number. And it's, we need to create a resource and an environment where people are going to feel safe to want to come and seek out the services. So there needs to be a drastic change with how we continue to push this message, whether it's a big increase within mental health professionals, whether it's changing the way that it's spoken about altogether, whether it's changing the way that we approach medication. There definitely needs to be something that changes throughout this field, because it's causing a lot of harm. And as you can see, people who aren't seeking out the services aren't staying alive, or maybe they're not even having any services, and they're miserable for the rest of their lives. So there's definitely a lot of people suffering, and we need something to change soon, before these numbers continue to increase.
Yeah.
For my last question, it's something that I ask all my guests, and it's a way to basically leave one last, lesson or experience about your own life. And really, I want you to picture that, or maybe whether you are writing a book about your life. And I just want you to give a little insight into what one of the chapters of that book would be called, and give us a little insight into why. So it could be a lesson that you learned from. Maybe it was an experience that you had, or maybe it's an example of what you've gone through within the mental health field. Just give us one last little approach of a chapter within your own life and why it's meaningful for you.
Well, I would say it would probably be something along the lines of Dreamwell being the epicenter of intermediate support services for mental health, because the problem isn't going away, it's getting worse. And if we do not provide another avenue outside of what's already being provided, we have therapists, we have counselors, we have doctors. We need mental health, behavioral health coaches to be able to impact the need or support the people who actually need the services. And to me, that would be the best chapter of my life. If I can make Dreamwell the epicenter of the mental health support services for intermediate care, that would be all I need. I mean, because I wouldn't have to see so much suffering. There would be solutions when somebody's mad, sad, or angry, or feeling all these emotions that they can't manage on their own. And it would also help people who don't want to do it alone. And a lot of people are feeling like, I have to try to navigate this on my own. And so for me, I'm a helper to my core. I've been helping people since I've been 5 years old. If I can provide that service, this will have all been worth it. So, yeah.
That's a great answer. I really appreciate that. And I'm excited to see this and see this in action, because I really do love the way that you approach your own services and being in that intermediate step, because it's so vital today. As we've spoken throughout this conversation, a lot of people don't want to seek out mental health services, but you're that first step that a lot of people take, and it's so essential. And I completely agree. We need more of these coaches. We need more of people that are in that intermediate phase, because that one step could leap to a lot of, healing
Yeah.
within a lot of people today. And we could drastically reduce the numbers of who is suffering today. So I, I really just want to thank you for the work that you do, for being on here on this episode of the Mental Insights podcast. It was a pleasure to interview you, and I can't wait to see, how Dreamwell Coaching continues to make, substantial changes within the lives of adults, children, and teachers today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much. And I wish you all the best of luck for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It was such a pleasure to interview you, and I'm so looking forward to having my audience listen to this episode, because I think what you do is of such value, and it'll definitely prove, substantial change within, many people's lives in the future.
Awesome.